Hello and welcome to another edition of Community Forum. My name is Joseph Feaster, the host of the program. And as I say, each and every time I come on air, I have just very exciting guests who are informative and have great information to bring to your attention. And that's no different today. Today, I am with a friend, a longtime friend, a colleague, a person who has unreproachable integrity. My friend, a candidate for the district attorney in Plymouth County, Rahsaan Hall. Good morning, Rahsaan. How are you
Morning.
this morning?
Good morning, Joseph. I am well. It's good to see you, and thank you for the opportunity to join you today.
Well, that's great. Well, I want to say a little bit about you even before I have you tell our viewing audience more about yourself.
Okay.
Not only you being a a a husband, a reverend, a distinguished lawyer, a civil rights activist, a leader. More importantly, you're my friend, and so therefore, it has been a pleasure knowing you in that regard. But from uh, a from the standpoint of talking about you from your skill sets beyond that, want to know and see if I can remember. Though I know you worked as a district attorney, assistant district attorney. Uh, you work now at the American Civil Liberties Union. You worked at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. You are a minister, and you can tell them which church you're at. Um, and I know you have some platforms, the that all I call them your your pillars on why you're running, and maybe you want to go into it at in more detail, but I want to give a little bit of preview to let folks know I do my homework for these
Yes.
programs. You know,
Yeah.
you're a believer in transparency and accountability. You're a believer in harm reduction, the care for victims and survivors, racial justice, and community engagement. So it seems like those pillars are the cornerstone of who you are and what you're looking to do upon becoming the Plymouth County District Attorney. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell our viewing audience, fill in the blanks, if anything that I've left out, just to let them get to know who Rahsaan Hall is.
Yeah, well, thank you. Like some of us preachers say, when somebody comes before us and says everything, you didn't leave much meat on the bone. So you covered a lot. But I will say, as a former resident of Stoughton, my wife and I decided to move to Brockton about 7 years. And that put us in Plymouth County as opposed to Norfolk County, where we were in Stoughton. But I also have come to understand that these district lines, these county lines, are very fluid as far as our community and where our people are. And so I know that as I'm talking to your viewing audience, some of them may live in Plymouth County or have friends and family who live in Plymouth County. And to that end, I think it's very important that people are engaged in this conversation about the district attorney's office and this race in particular. And the reason I'm running is because justice demands better, and so do we. Through every point of my career and even parts of my education, I've seen too much injustice. And so I am running to reclaim the spirit of justice. I think that's also informed by my faith and my role as an ordained reverend, but also my calling to public service. As you mentioned, my first job out of law school, and I graduated from a fantastic institution, Northeastern University
Hey,
School of
hey.
Law, with illustrious alum like yourself, and Senator Mo Cowan, and the Attorney General Maura Healey, like Rachel Rollins. Like we've turned out some pretty impressive folks. So
And a former district attorney, Ralph Martin.
and the former DA from Suffolk County, Ralph Martin, exactly. So, so Northeastern is doing pretty good. But right while I was at law school, working with young people in juvenile detention facilities, seeing the injustices that they faced. When I was a young ADA for 8 years in Suffolk County in Boston, handling gun, drug, and homicide cases, I saw injustices in the community. Worked with law enforcement to secure convictions, but also saw some of those same law enforcement officers treat our communities with disdain and disrespect. I then went on to the Lawyers Committee, where you used to serve on the board, and got to do a lot of important work: voting rights, public accommodations, race and national origin discrimination cases, employment, housing. Those were some of the things that helped shape and form my identity as a lawyer. And then I went to the ACLU and became the director of the racial justice program. I just left there back in December so that I could run for office. And, I'm putting it on the line because I believe in the importance of this role. I believe in the importance of having representation in this role. When you think about the criminal justice system or the criminal legal system and the gross racial disparities, it requires persons of conviction, integrity, and a sense of justice to really be in there to address some of those things. And so that's why I'm running, and those are some of the important aspects of my career that help frame my approach to this race, but also to this office.
I mentioned at the outset, and some of what I'm calling them your pillars. You may have another nomenclature for it. Maybe it's your essence. Maybe it's your belief system, your value system. I think that's how you stated on your website. You call it your values. Let's talk about those, because the type of district attorney office is fashioned by the district attorney's office. Talks about what cases are prosecuted on. There's a whole level. You're both a manager and a litigator. Let's talk about how you would incorporate some of those, that transparency and accountability, that harm reduction, that care for victims and survivors, racial justice, community engagement. Let's spend a little time walking through that plank of values that you have here, and how you might incorporate those into your office at the Plymouth County DA.
Certainly. Beginning with those, and you're right, we refer to them as our core values, and beginning with caring for victims and survivors of violent crimes, ensuring that they're treated with dignity and respect, and not just treated like a witness in a case, but finding out what are the needs and the services that they need to help support them, because the criminal legal system is very large and confusing and can be very cold sometimes. And then on top of that, to have been victimized, the district attorney's office represents the Commonwealth. They don't represent the individual victim, but people have a belief that the DA is their lawyer when it's not. I'm not trying to change the role, but I'm trying to make the role more humane. And so, historically, district attorneys have said we are the voice for victims and we are the ones who protect them. And I push back on that a little bit, because victims have their own voice and they can exercise their voice. I think the district attorney's office provides a platform to help victims speak in instances where the Commonwealth is pursuing some form of justice for someone who has committed violence. And so I don't want to take the role of saying I am the voice of victims or the DA's office is the voice of victims, but we want to serve victims of crime to make sure that justice is served and treat them with dignity and respect. Make sure that they're just not being summoned to court to show up and then testify, and then nobody is engaging with them or making sure that their needs are met. When it comes to harm reduction, I believe that we should be finding less punitive ways to deal with people who are struggling with substance use disorder and mental health issues. we cannot prosecute our way out of the opioid crisis. And there isn't substantial enough evidence that suggests tough on crime approaches act as a deterrent or help get people sober or clean. And when people are dealing with mental health issues, it's not that they are acting rationally and therefore rational punishment is going to deter future crime or get them in a place that's better. And so I believe in accountability, but I also believe in meeting people's needs. And sometimes when people are struggling with either substance use disorder or mental health issues, we've got to meet them where they're at and find accountability measures that just don't punish them, but help get them on the right track to recovery or healing or whatever it is that they need. From the standpoint,
Before you continue on your values, I just want to stop right here because this is what I call the elephant in the room on the conversations around district attorneys. And you know where I'm going. I'm going with this whole discussion about, oh, well, we're only going to look at certain types of crimes that we're going to prosecute, and we may not, and we're just going to have, well, former district attorney in Suffolk County and now U.S. attorney in Massachusetts, Rollins, had a view that said, listen, certain level of crimes we're just not going to prosecute. And that has created a furor and I think some very disparate views throughout the community. And so I'm going to do, because I don't know if it's come up in any of your forums, if you've been asked, but if not, then Joe Feaster is going to ask that question because I know that's the elephant in the room, and I want to give you an opportunity to state your position on our program here at Community Forum.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for asking the question. And I fully believed in and supported the presumptive non-prosecution of certain cases that then Suffolk County District Attorney, now U.S. Attorney Rachel Rollins created as a part of her policy when coming in. And there were two reasons why she did that. And one was those were some of the offenses, these low-level offenses that did not present an immediate or severe risk of harm to our communities, were offenses that had greater racial disparities, but also were matters that clogged up the courts and put restraints on the resources that the office had to handle some of the more significant cases. And the data shows, and I know this from my own experience as a former prosecutor, we dismissed those types of cases all the time. It wasn't until this Black woman gets this position and says, we're going to dismiss some of these cases, that then all of a sudden there's an issue. Secondly, the research shows that people who, again, in the first instance, presumptive non-prosecution, people who do not have their cases prosecuted are less likely to come back to court for these types of offenses. And she did a study that looked at data for several years, not just the year and a half that she had been in the office at the time they started the study, but I think like 10 years worth of data showed that there was a greater likelihood that people would be arrested or reoffended if the cases were initially prosecuted. So there's some empirical value that suggests that that is a better approach, with the framing that it's presumptive, that it's not mandatory, and that it's in the first instance. These are people, it's their first offense, or there's some extenuating circumstance that suggests that it's better not to prosecute. And then lastly, crime is down in Boston. Violent crime is down as well. And so all of the fear mongering and saber rattling that folks have been doing, like these progressive prosecutors have made us unsafe, they're not looking at what's happened in Boston. And they're pointing to places where there may be a correlation between the increase in crime and a progressive prosecutor coming in. But we understand that correlation does not mean causation. And some of the reasons or indicators for the uptick in crime are not related to the policies of those progressive prosecutors in other counties. And so the question underlying the question is, will I, as the Plymouth County District Attorney, do something like that? Yes, I will.
In charge of, as we oftentimes say, don't let facts get in the way. And as you pointed out, there has been empirical evidence which demonstrates historically that that has been the case. But I just want, this is just a clarifying point. I understand what you're saying. I want to make sure the viewing audience. So if we have a, a person who is breaking into cars, say for instance, and say that is one of the ones, first instance, etc. That'll be looked at with regards to that individual case, not a situation that says, oh, first time it's out the door. Because some people said, oh, if it's that case and that's the presumption, the person never gets any type of adjudication or any type of consideration in out of the district attorney's office. Can you just clarify what it means to have the presumptive and how that does in real time and in action, just so the viewing audience will understand?
Absolutely. And to be clear, these are cases where there does not involve a victim. So if somebody's personal property is destroyed, like the example you gave where somebody's breaking into cars or busting out windows, if there is a victim, and in these instances it's the property owner, we're not going to dismiss those cases out of hand. We might try to find other ways to resolve it, like restorative justice. But to the point of your question around presumptive non-prosecution, for motor vehicle offenses, for disorderly conduct, trespass offenses, simple possession of controlled substances, the presumption is that if this is the first time for a person, that those cases are going to be dismissed, that we don't need to clog up the courts prosecuting these offenses where chances are, and the stats support this, that person is not going to come back to court if they're not prosecuted for this case.
And I gave you that example because that's what's in the mind. That's what people believe.
Exactly.
And I'm glad you dispelled and clarified that, because that's a thing. Oh, if there's a property crime, then the DA is not going to do anything. And that's not what you're saying. So good. I'm glad you clarified. Go forth with your values. I know you have at least three more values to talk about. I'm going to be quiet for a moment anyway.
Hey, look, feel free to jump in if there's anything that needs to be expounded upon or clarified. So the third value is racial justice. We need to make sure that the district attorney's office is not making racial disparities worse through its policies or practices. And so some of that is looking at the types of cases that get prosecuted, the types of investigations that occur, and how those investigations occur. But there also needs to be an intentional commitment to collecting data. One of the things that frustrated me the most when I was an advocate working at the ACLU is raising concerns of racism within the system and racial disparities that resulted. And prosecutors, almost to a person, would say, it's not our fault. We just get what society leaves on our doorstep, and we just handle those matters. But they say that without having done any type of data analysis, collection even, or reporting on that. And we can't manage what we don't measure. So there are racial disparities in the system. We need to measure them and find out where in the trajectory of a case are there disparities emerging, and then develop policies and practices that begin to address some of those disparities. It also includes diversifying the staff of the district attorney's office, and it means engaging the community in a more robust way to make sure that there is community voice that brings together a variety and diversity of views, perspectives, racial, socioeconomic, ethnic, national backgrounds to the table to inform the approaches that the DA's office should be taking to matters of crime, community disruption, and public safety. The other value is transparency and accountability. I believe that we need to increase the level of transparency and accountability that exists in the district attorney's office, and in this office in particular. When I was at the ACLU, we ran a public education campaign called What a Difference a DA Makes. And part of that program was to educate the public on the role, power, and influence of district attorneys. One of the things that we did during that campaign was send public records requests to all of the district attorney's offices to gauge their level of transparency, but also to find out what some of their policies and practices, training materials, prosecution statistics, what they had. 10 out of the 11 district attorneys provided us the public records we requested, either for free or a nominal charge. One even gave us more than we asked for free. But the one that didn't give us the public records was the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office. They sent us a letter that said it will cost $1.2 million to fulfill a public records request, and that it would take the equivalent of 49 years of person hours of work to collect those public records. And so, being the ACLU, we sued them. And when we called them to give them notice of the suit that we were filing, they turned around, hired counsel, and said, oh, you can have these records for free. That's not transparent, and that's not accountability. And that's what we need in the office. And that's what I want to make sure, that the DA's office is responsible to the residents of Plymouth County, to keep them informed about what they are doing, what its policies and practices and outcomes are, by making more robust data collection, analysis, and reporting available. And then, to the extent that there are mistakes that are made or injustices that happen, that the office is responsible and accountable to the community to correct those injustices or mistakes. And
can you give us the time frame for that, so people know when you at the ACLU one made that particular request to the district attorney's office? What year was it, so we know under which DAs we are talking, particularly in Plymouth County?
Sure. So we launched that campaign in 2017. There was a DA election in 2018, and then we sent the public records requests out in 2019, and I believe it was in 2020 when we filed that lawsuit. And so for here in Plymouth County, that was the incumbent, the current district attorney, who has been here for 21 years, was appointed by Jane Swift, and has continued to be reelected. And so that was under this current administration.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then the last value is community engagement. The public deserves to know what it is their district attorney's office does. Everything that it does, it's being done in our names as residents of the Commonwealth, as taxpayers of the Commonwealth, and in that particular county. So there should be a higher level of engagement. People need to understand what it is the DA's office does, what services it provides. But also, the district attorney's office should be engaging with community organizations and residents and community partners to develop community-based programming that's going to yield better results for the people who are going through this system, whether they're victims or survivors of crimes or the accused. If we're trying to divert people out of the system, we need to be diverting them to community-based programming that have the resources and support to make sure that those people aren't coming back to the system. If it's reentry programs for the people who have been accused, convicted, and served the sentence, we need to make sure that they are able to transition back into our communities. And that requires the support of community-based programs and organizations. And to the extent that there are areas of concerns or hot issues that are emerging in communities, the district attorney's office needs to be engaged so that we aren't just sitting in a bubble making prosecutorial decisions in a vacuum, devoid of any context from the people who have the direct experience and the lived experience on the ground.
Well, in terms of fine, I think that, I've gotten an appreciation. And like I said, I went on your website, which I found very impressive and informative in terms of to learn, but I wasn't surprised because I know Rahsaan Hall, so I wasn't surprised. It just, what it did was to verify what I already knew. But the other thing I'm looking at it, okay, I'm going to say this is your first foray into a political office. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and I've been an operative. I go all the way back to the late Ted Kennedy as races, and so I've been around with a number of campaigns, and I've looked at what you're doing. I've looked at how you've gone about it, your approach, your fortitude, your commitment. And what struck me, and I'm just going to take the moment to do this, because while they say lawn signs don't vote, endorsements don't necessarily mean it's the people who live in the district who are going to determine who they want to represent them. But there's something illustrative of the fact of the types of endorsements that you have received. And while there are many more than these, and I don't want to spend all of my moments here or with you to do them, but I think it's important to mention the ones that I am going to mention. So you have U.S. Senator Ed Markey, U.S. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, State Senator Sonia Chang Diaz, who was a former candidate for governor of Massachusetts, State Senator Jamie Eldridge, State Representative Michelle Dubois, State Representative Russell Holmes, State Representative Jay Livingston, Attorney General candidate Andrea Campbell, former Assistant AG Quentin Palfrey, Plymouth County Democratic Lead, Hingham Democratic Town Committee, Hull Democratic Town Committee, Middleborough Democratic Town Committee, Real Justice PAC, the Justice for All, and the Young Democrats of Massachusetts. Now, hey, I've been in a bunch of campaigns. I mean, come on. To have that level from federal to state to local to community to the Democratic committees, that's saying something that what you are saying is resonating with the voters in this particular district. So I know at sometime soon, my executive producer, Roy Cohen, is going to tell me you got only about a few minutes left. I'm trying to keep the time frame, but I get so involved and engaged in these things, I might miss the time. So he's the one who will rein me in. But I want you to speak to your voters. Tell them how they can assist you, how they can go with you, how they can, what you are doing. And in fact, I'm getting it now, and I'm told that I have about 2 minutes. So those 2 minutes, I'm going to only need 30 seconds at the end. You take the rest of the time, Rahsaan.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, first of all, folks, if you want to learn more about me or this campaign, please visit our campaign website, hallforda.com. That's Hall, HALL, the number 4, DA.com. There you'll see those core values, learn more about me, my background, my policy platforms, the values of the campaign. There's also ways to sign up to volunteer or to get notifications about what the campaign is doing and the ways that we are getting engaged here in Plymouth County. There's also a link to donate. As all campaigns, the 3 things you need are votes, volunteers, and money. And so if anybody who's listening,
I'm going to change that for you. It's MVP, money, votes, and people.
Money, votes, and people. Okay, there it is. There it is. I like that. I'm gonna use that.
All right, just give me approbation. That's all.
Exactly. The endorsements are there. You'll see the people. There's a couple more coming. We're having a fundraiser next Wednesday, the August 3rd, from 6:30 to 9 here in Brockton at Brockton Beer Company. It's one of the few Black-owned breweries in Massachusetts. This is about reclaiming the spirit of justice, and I am the person with the experience and perspective on this work to do it for Plymouth County. So I ask for those of you all who live in Plymouth County for your support and ultimately your vote on November 8th in the general election. And I appreciate all that you have done for me, Mr. Feaster, and creating this platform.
Well, thank you. My time has run out. Best of luck, Rahsaan. Let's stay in touch. Godspeed.
Thank you.